do not take it personally if faculty members do not actually reply back to you. Most PhD application processes look like faculty getting in a room and caping for the students that they know and that they want to get in. It does not work like an undergraduate admissions process where it's like a blind review or what have you. No. People know names, they know your work, and they get in a room and they are arguing for the students that they want. Who do you think is going to argue for you more? Somebody who's heard from you or somebody who can't put a voice to an application or a face to an application? So it is so, so important that you make contact with people you are interested in working with before you actually apply. Welcome back, everyone. It is your host, Simon, your professor friend who turns to her work as a scholar of religion and spirituality to answer questions both big and small about being human in this everyday world that we live in. And today I'm feeling grounding and I've been feeling very intellectually playful recently. And I've been feeling intellectually playful by allowing myself to dabble in areas that I want to be more knowledgeable about, but I fully do not expect to become an expert in. And so one of those, or at least an expert in the way that I'm an expert in this thing that I do behind the mic right now in terms of being a scholar of religion and spirituality. One of those ways that I have been feeling intellectually playful is I've really been trying to become more knowledgeable on natal charts and birth charts. And of course, like any good Black femme, queer, lesbian, I know the big three, I know the basics. Probably much more than just the basics in a lot of cases. Often in a room of gays, I find I'm up there. But one thing that I really want to be able to do one day is I want to be able to read people's birth charts and tell them where I think that they might be able to find some intellectual purpose and passion. And I think that could just be a really cool thing to do because when I look at my birth chart, I can definitely point out certain planets, certain placements, certain houses that definitely inform my intellectualism. And so all that to say is I've been trying to learn more about that. And I've recently been trying to answer the question for myself, what parts of people's chart does one really need to pay attention to in order to understand what can intellectually propel them, the things that they're most curious about, the things that they could spend forever thinking about, or forever learning about. I've been trying to learn that, and I won't share my findings yet, but I'm realizing that Jupiter is a really big one. The house that Jupiter is in is frequently a house of abundance and in a space that they can exist a lot in. And so that's a good place of starting in terms of intellectual curiosity of where and what house your Jupiter is in, which is going to sound very woo-woo if you're not into astrology, but basically your house is essentially the stage in which that part of your life plays out in. So if Jupiter is abundance, and let's say it is in your 8th house, which is like the house of transitions, grief, psychic knowledge, other people's resources, life, death, what have you, then you are somebody like me who is going to feel like you can spend forever thinking about what makes us human, life and death, people's relationships between other people, things like that. So I've been dibbling and dabbling in that and just trying to build up my knowledge base. I also am finding that people's midhaven is important. I'm also finding that anyone who has any like major placements in their 9th house or wherever your 9th house shows up in your chart is also probably a space that you can be really intellectual and introspective on. I always find that birth chart readings, if doing nothing else, gives people language that can feel descriptive of who they are. And if not totally descriptive, then at least offers a point of self-reflection where they can come to words on their own that feels more descriptive of who they are, that they are better able to name their sense of self and how they show up in this world. I just feel like if you can look at a birth chart and be like, I think this, what a great and interesting way to be able to help people find a different kind of intellectual path or engagement. So anyways, I've been feeling intellectually playful in that space. I am currently reading a book by Michael Pollan about the history of consciousness, and I've been reading this chapter on whether or not plants have consciousness, which I just found so fascinating. Like, I can't believe that people think that plants don't have consciousness, because the book starts from the premise that everyone assumes that plants don't have consciousness, when I would actually say I fall on the total opposite, that I'm like, of course plants have consciousness and feel and are sentient beings and what have you. So and it's a very like neuroscience, he's a science writer book. And so again, I am someone who also thinks about consciousness, but from a different humanities, Black studies perspective, which is different from the neuroscience perspective. But I'm actually really excited to start thinking across those. I just haven't gotten deep enough in the book yet to feel like I can make some 101 connections. But what to say is, I know nothing about neuroscience. I'm not a theorist or philosopher on consciousness, but I am just feeling very intellectually playful and giving myself this space to just dibble dabble in those things. I'm excited for myself because for the majority of my life, I've always thought about my intellectual life as the most serious thing about me. And there's something about doing this, being more active on social media, preparing for Prof in the Park, and just creating, I just feel like a way more playful and lighthearted intellectual life. Still as rigorous and still as fun, but like just bringing some joy to it and different kinds of vibes to it that I've been really appreciating. It's making me feel very young and youthful and still like a big nerd. And also intellectually stimulated in a way that's not just focused on pop culture in terms of like TV and consumption and reality TV, which I can do all day. You go on my social media, you see me doing that, but it's just nice to feel intellectually playful and something that I don't feel so saturated by. And I just feel like we're in a phase where like there's such a homogenization of everything we're consuming, but it just feels nice to be intellectually playful. Parts of the everyday that I do not always get to dabble in, but I'm actually creating time to. That's actually not a very good segue because our grounding question of the day is how to apply to graduate school. And particularly, I'm talking about a PhD program in the humanities. We're getting in that time of year where folks start in the fall. The fall is a big application time because most graduate school applications are due in December, January of the year. And every year I talk to quite a number of people on how to get into grad school, what I did, what I think is really important. I don't even want to say coached in a formal way, but I've definitely helped multiple people get into PhD programs, read their materials, kind of 101, walked them through the process, and they've actually been extremely successful. All that is to say is I say that because I feel like this is actually something that I feel really passionately about. And I feel like it's a process that is so shut behind closed doors that a lot of people don't know about. But a lot of people are interested in intellectually engaging and making a career out of knowledge. And I think getting a PhD is a great one. There's not buku money over here, right? But a lot of people who go into education are not just trying to exploit the world for all of its material resources and gain as much money. We find joy in other things. But all that to say is it is such a lovely life lived. And I'm always happy to talk to people about how they can get into this career path because I am only here because people were so gracious with me. So I want to repay that. And so I'm hoping by recording this episode, I'm kind of being preemptive on the influx of emails that I know I'm going to get, as I always do every year, of people wanting to talk about grad school and first steps. And so I'm hoping that I will be able to both talk to them, which I always do, and lend my time because people lend their time to me and continue to lend their time to me when I want to make different kinds of moves, but that I can also send this to them as like a step one. And so I want to talk about today how to apply to grad school. And this is just a primer conversation, but here's what I would do. I've got a few things, I think like at least 3 or 4 big points that I want to walk you through. Okay, you've decided. I want to start looking into apply to a PhD program. The first thing that you want to do is to be able to identify a field and a program that you want to apply to. Now, this works extremely differently than undergraduate institutions. In an undergraduate institution, you can basically throw a rock and hit an undergraduate institution. That is not how PhD programs work. For example, I applied to programs in religious studies. In terms of fully funded PhD programs, I want to say in religious studies, I want to say that there's probably only about 12. So this is a really, really, really small number. And I say fully funded because unless you come from money, have money, or doing this as like a side quest to you can't even do a PhD part-time. But unless you like come from money and are not worried about money, do not go to a program that is not fully funded. That's harsh advice. But like I said, if you do not come from money, because you already are not going to get paid. Like you're going to get paid something, like just enough to live. But I can't imagine not going to a fully funded program in doing that full time. I think for a lot of the ones that aren't fully funded, they expect that people are working full time at other things. But all that to say is if you want to like do this like full humanities, go into academia or just get a PhD, definitely look at fully funded programs. And so what does a fully funded program mean? A fully funded program means both you're not paying tuition or anything like that, but that there's also some kind of living stipend that you're getting, meaning that as a PhD student, you also work for the university as teaching fellows, service, all of these things. But you want to make sure that you're getting paid basically a livable wage to do that work. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify fully funded programs in your field. How do you do that? There's tons of websites. Let's say you wanted to do a PhD in environmental studies, or you wanted to do a PhD in American studies. Truly, I would say, step one, Google fully funded programs in American studies. You'll likely get a list. There's tons of websites. But one thing that I think is better than that in terms of identifying a program that you are interested in is look at the books that made you want to actually go to grad school. If you want to go to grad school, I'm assuming you read books that are in a particular kind of field, and you might even have a favorite book and a favorite author. Somebody that you read in undergrad or in your master's program that you were like, I read this person's book and I thought I want to produce knowledge in the world like that. Go to that author, Google that author, see two things. See where they went to grad school. What graduate program did they go to that trained them to be able to write a book that made you fall in love with the field? Answer that question. Let's say they went to UNC Chapel Hill, for example. Then you look at UNC Chapel Hill's program and you start looking and seeing like, okay, this program seems right to me. So you can either look at where they went, but also look at where that person currently has a job. Let's say they went to UNC Chapel Hill, but now they work at the University of Pennsylvania, for example. A lot of universities have faculty who have PhDs, but they themselves are not departments that have graduate students. So when you look at where your favorite author went, then you can guarantee be like, yes, of course, they have a graduate program. They went there. If you look at where they teach, they may or may not have a graduate program, but it's still worth noting. And so I think that is a better way of identifying programs that might be a good fit for you rather than just Googling what are the programs. First step is to Google something. The second, more sophisticated step, I would identify a couple authors that you love and whose work you love, see where they went, but then also who their advisor was. Once you've identified a couple programs, you're like, oh, funny enough, like, 3 of the 5 people that I really love and whose work I really love, they all went to UNC Chapel Hill, or they all went to Boston University. Then you can be like, okay, maybe I need to look at that program because they're clearly producing scholars in a field that I like. So I would do that as first research. The process of identifying a program that is going to work for you is something that you should take your time with. I think a lot of people decide a month or 2 before applications and they think, okay, I'm just going to apply here, or I want to go here because this is a prestigious school. The undergraduate prestige, this is something that is also really important. Undergraduate prestige of institutions does not map onto PhD prestige. For example, a state school that has a PhD program, their PhD program, even though let's say they're not a Harvard, they're not a Princeton, but that PhD program in the field is going to be quote unquote the Harvard or the Princeton of that field. That is something that is really different about PhD programs. That state school PhD might be the top dog roof in the field compared to an Ivy League institution. Just because a program is housed at an Ivy League institution or an institution that is really reputable for their undergraduate education or even their master's program, that does not map on to the rigor, the credibility, the prestige of their PhD or graduate program. So again, you want to take your time to do this kind of research. You also want to take your time to research what is their job placement rate, meaning how many people are actually graduating from this program and getting jobs, whether it be in academia or a related field. Because like any program, this isn't in your time, and you want to make sure that a good job placement rate, whether it be tenure track academic positions or not, is going to signal to you that, okay, this program actually takes seriously on making sure that their students launch after spending all of this time in this program and after dedicating so much work to the university. Now, I also want to make a note on interdisciplinarity because while some people are like, I know I'm going into history, or I know I'm going into environmental studies, a lot of folks, particularly I think if you listen to this, your work is probably going to be very interdisciplinary. My work is very interdisciplinary. I was in two departments. I was in African American studies and it got renamed to Black studies. And I was in religious studies. And within religious studies, I was in two subfields. And so I would be an example of somebody who is considered an interdisciplinary scholar. And I just want to take a second to break down about how that is going to play out in the PhD program process. If you're somebody with a focus on Black studies, on focus on gender, you're likely your work is interdisciplinary, which means you're going to need a program that is conducive and is in support of interdisciplinary work, meaning there are a lot of different signals. Some programs will literally explicitly say, we are training scholars in interdisciplinarity. But another really big sign is that that program, let's say it's in religious studies, let's say it's in history, offers an opportunity for you to do some kind of dual degree or certificate. And if programs offer those kinds of dual degrees and certificates in Black studies or in gender studies, in history, environmental studies, what have you, that is going to be a signal that is a department that is looking for students who are speaking across fields. If you are an interdisciplinary scholar, it might be very well that Boston University's American Studies program seems great for you, but another institution's history program seems like it would be a better fit for you. Or you're going to see when you look at the scholars that you love that somewhere in American studies, somewhere in history, somewhere in gender studies, which is going to signal to you that you're going to have to do research on all those different programs because you want to be able to find an intellectual home for yourself that is going to be conducive to the kinds of research and questions that you're asking. When you are somebody who is interdisciplinary, you're going to have to work harder. You naturally have to work harder because you have to explain yourself to do two or three or sometimes even four different fields. You have to have your research make sense to those fields. You're going to be applying for jobs in those fields. So you want to make sure that if you are an interdisciplinary scholar, a scholar whose work is positioned, if you are in Black studies or gender studies, you almost always have a sister department or field. And so when you are somebody who straddles two fields, it's even more work to make sure you're applying to a program that actually supports interdisciplinarity. How do you know that? How do you know a program supports interdisciplinarity? The next step that you are also going to do is you are going to do a deep dive on the faculty that are associated with that department. Look at what work they're doing. Are they jointly appointed between departments? For example, if you're in a department and you're saying, okay, folks are jointly in American studies and in history and in WGSS and in Black studies, that's going to signal to you that within the faculty itself, there's a strong interdisciplinary element. But even better than looking at faculty research is looking at the current graduate students. See what kind of research those current graduate students are doing and see if it sounds like something cool and funky. If you're a cool and funky kind of scholar whose work is at all these different kind of intersections, or you're interested in documentary filmmaking or visual arts or what have you, that is something that you need to do. Get a good sense of the kinds of projects. If you get a good sense of the projects, get a good sense of whether or not, lots of people like to say we're an interdisciplinary department, but their faculty and their students do not actually reflect that. They're just using that as a hot word. So actually go and look at, okay, what are people researching? What are they doing? And seeing what's up there. The second thing that you're going to do once you have spent, I just cannot emphasize enough how much due diligence you should do in researching programs that are a good fit for you. So once you have a good idea of the landscape, of the program institutional landscape, of your field in the humanities and where people are going to graduate school, what is fully funded, what is interdisciplinary. Once you have a good sense of that, then what I want you to do, and this is such a crucial step, and once you've identified the programs and you're like, okay, I know on paper at least, I want to go to these schools. I applied to 4 schools. I got into 3, didn't hear from the one I didn't get into. Yeah, got interviews and offers basically from all 3 of these places. And I think that's I would say on average, people apply to 4 to 6 programs. Again, this is just my field in religious studies. Every field is going to be different, and there's going to be more options for some and fewer for others. Once you identify, let's say your top 4, your top 5, your top 6 that you are going to apply to, it is so crucial that you talk to people at those programs and in those programs. And there are 2 levels of talking and reaching out that you need to do. First, reach out to current graduate students. Reach out to folks who have similar research interests as you, if you want to do that. Reach out to folks who, if you're at a PWI and let's say you also know you might be the only Black scholar and there's only one other Black scholar, reach out to that other Black scholar, see if they respond back to you. Reach out to all the first year students. The email doesn't need to be too crazy. 1 or 2 lines introducing yourself, letting them know that you're applying to the school and you're wondering if they have time to talk about their experience in the application process. Boom. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. Talking to graduate students at the places I applied to was the most game-changing thing to my applications. And I say that because they gave me advice on what I should include in my program. They gave me advice in terms of, yes, you can hear the department's words on their webpage, but how that actually translates to the department culture. They gave me a bunch of offices and programs and other people I should look into so that I could include that in my application and actually reflect on my application that I have done the research and know something about the institution and why I want to be there specifically. I was lucky enough where some people even sent me their application materials so that I could get a sense of what a successful application looked like. I would not have been able to do any of that if I just hadn't cold emailed people. I literally would just email people straight up. Just cold email them. You have to do that step. Not only do you have to cold email the graduate students, you might email 10 people and get 2 phone calls on the books when all is said and done, for sure. I would say once you have done that, then you need to email and talk to the faculty members who you want to work with, which it can feel really intimidating, but you need to send that email. Again, introducing yourself, letting them know that you're interested in their work, how your research interests relate to their work, and that you're interested in applying for graduate school. The response rate is really going to vary. Do not take it personally if faculty members do not actually reply back to you. But why is this important? It's important for a couple of reasons. Most PhD application processes look like faculty getting in a room and arguing with each other over the applications, and not arguing with each other because it's collegial, but they are caping for the students that they know and that they want to get in. That is literally how it works. It does not work like an undergraduate admissions process where it's a blind review or what have you. No, people know names, they know your work, and they get in a room and they are arguing for the students that they want. Who do you think is going to argue for you more? Somebody who's heard from you or somebody who can't put a voice to application or a face to an application? So it is so important that you make contact with people you are interested in working with before you actually apply. I reached out to so many people at Yale. And so I would say for the people to reach out to the 1 or 2 faculty members, maybe there are even 3 or 4 if you're an interdisciplinary person that you are interested in working with. On most applications, they're going to ask you if you reached out to anybody, and you're going to list those people because then your application is going to get flagged to those people that you talk to. So you want to reach out to faculty members who you've spoken with. You also want to reach out. Most programs have a director of graduate studies. Also reach out to them. They're in charge of overseeing graduate students. So they're also going to be a good person to talk to. Most programs have subfields. So even though you're in, let's say, religious studies or anthropology, for example, or something like that, there are going to be different subfields within that department, and you're going to be housed in a specific subfield. So yes, you're in religious studies, but for example, I had 2 subfields, again, interdisciplinary, was in religion and modernity and Islamic studies. Most of those subs have an assistant director of graduate studies. So you also want to reach out to that person who oversees the subfield, which is the assistant director of graduate studies. And then you also probably want to reach out to the graduate studies advisor as a whole. So those are the levels of people you want to reach out to. I cannot emphasize enough, do not apply to programs that you have not spoken to anybody from. This is such a crucial step, and I think is the step that people are totally unaware of. And is, if you know this is like also where privilege and prior experience comes in. But getting a draft of those emails and sending them out to people and following up, even when it seems pesky, but just getting time on people's books to be able to pick people's brains and see what a program is about, talk to the faculty member, being able to articulate your research. And we're going to go into that of like how much you really need to articulate on those phone calls is really important. Okay. So again, we've gone over how to identify a program. We've gone over the fact that it's absolutely crucial that you reach out to people in those programs. The third thing that I want to talk about, which is probably going to be the last one, is how you talk about yourself, how you talk about your research interests. For some places, there's a personal statement. For some places, there's a research statement. For some places, there's only one, and they both kind of function as this personal research statement. And I just want to take a second to talk about this. So even though it might be a personal statement, it needs to relate to your intellectual journey and how you arrive there research-wise. This is very different from an undergraduate personal statement where they want to know about you as a person and maybe something you went through when you were growing up and lesson you learned. No. In a graduate school personal statement, even if it says personal statement and there's no research statement or they're separate, you need to be able to talk about how these lived experiences and your prior experiences have contributed to an intellectual journey. What is your intellectual narrative of growth and why you want to have the next step in that journey be going to that school? So I just want to say that very clearly, that the personal statement works so differently applying for a PhD. In undergrad, they want to know all these things, personal things about you. Everything that you mentioned in that statement needs to be in support of them understanding who you are as an intellectual. If it does not fit into that intellectual narrative in a concise way, do not put it in there. Okay, just going to say that. So then there's a question of, well, how do you articulate yourself? I don't have research experience. That's why I'm going to grad school. Like, how do I say that I have research experience? And here's some advice that I was given that I think was just really invaluable. And that is that the point of a research statement isn't to have such a clear idea on what you're going to write your dissertation, because everyone will tell you over and over again. Let me tell you, I wrote that research statement and I have never looked at it since. My project changed completely. That's literally the whole point. Nobody goes in doing the same project that they intended to. But what people do go in doing and being consistent with, and this is actually the thing you want to say most clearly and spend most time refining, is the question, the research question you are interested in. You don't have to say what you think the findings are. You don't necessarily even need to say what you think the intervention is going to be at this point. But you have to be very, 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 very clear. I am interested in X, Y, and Z. I am interested in the role of embodied knowledge when it comes to Black women's relationship to the Islamic tradition. I am interested in looking at sites of Black Muslim subjectivity and subject formation outside of the mosque and veiling and all these traditional sites. Those are all questions. I didn't tell you how I'm going to answer those questions. I have said nothing about how I think I'm going to answer those questions. But what I was able to do was articulate very clearly a research question that I am interested in. Being able to articulate clearly a research question you are interested in is so much more important, in my opinion, than being able to say, and this is exactly how I'm going to answer it. Of course, you can say, I want to do close readings of this text or archival research or what have you. But being able to really articulate the question you're interested in, and also, if you can, the sites you're interested in asking questions at. So for example, I could say, I'm interested in doing archival research on 20th century Black Muslim women. I'm articulating a site. I'm going to look at the archival material of 20th century Black women. What am I going to find? I don't know, but I'm just gesturing towards a how. Or you might say, I'm interested in 19th century West African, what have you. That's me articulating a place of my research, something I can point to. So articulating both the question you're interested in and where you want to look I'm interested in questions about embodied knowledge as it relates to Muslim women's relationship to Islam. And where am I going to look for answers to that? I'm interested in looking at archival research on 20th century Black thinkers. That is what you want to be able to articulate. You want to articulate the question and you want to be able to articulate the site. Do not spend so much time saying what you think the intervention is going to be. If you do know that, sure, okay, but at the same time, a part of graduate school is actually getting a real sense of the field and being able to articulate that. But as long as you can articulate the question that you're interested in, a site perhaps that you're interested in looking at, another huge thing that you're going to need to include in that research statement or that personal statement is you're going to be able to have to say how the faculty members at that department are going to help you answer these questions. And you don't have to say it because they also work on 20th century Black Muslims. You can say this person is interested in questions about knowledge. This person is interested in questions about the category of religion and how expanding it helps us understand the American religious landscape better. By being able to identify the questions that you're interested in, the questions that other faculty members are interested in, then you have similar questions, and that transcends particular kind of historical context or what have you. Somebody could be working on 15th century pre-modern texts, but is interested in a question about knowledge and how Muslims make knowledge. And even though that person is working 500 years prior to you, they're still going to be able to help you theorize and think about knowledge as a category and the tradition and people's relationship to the tradition, even if it's not in the same time and place. So again, having a research statement that identifies a question you're interested in, maybe identifies a site you're interested in looking to for answers, not necessarily how you're going to, but just gesturing towards like, okay, this is a shape, and being able to articulate super, super, super clearly how the faculty members are going to help you in pursuit of that question is the most important part of that. So this was, just a 3-stepper on like 3 things that I think are really important information to know on applying for graduate school. The first, we talked about what it means to identify a program. The second, we talked about the absolutely necessity of reaching out to and talking to people in that program. And then I just gave you some advice on the most important thing in those documents that you're going to submit is having a clear research question and being able to articulate how that program is going to help you answer that question. So I hope that is helpful to you all. Today, I am feeling grounding and I am just always in this phase of transition, but I am getting ready to leave New York and I've got a writing deadline ahead of me and I've just got a lot going on in this moment. But today I woke up feeling overwhelmed, but I just kept telling myself, I'm like, I needed to record 2 episodes. I just was feeling a little overwhelmed and I just kept telling myself one thing after another. I'm really big on the fact that I have 18 days between now and this deadline and all these things going on. And I think I have to do everything every day. And that is not the case. So today I'm feeling grounded that I really took one bite at a time and things felt better. So that is that. I actually am so happy too, because I just checked the inbox and we had somebody write in a question in the inbox and I just love that. If you are listening, Karima, I want to let you know that I'm going to be answering your question next. I promise I will be getting to that. So happy to see you guys here. I hope you have a great week. I will see you back here on Monday. And in the meantime, follow me on all socials. I am ANABDK on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And send me a question at Grounded with Dr. Iman if you want me to answer this. Okay, bye-bye, guys.